the founder and CEO of the Marriage Pact. Welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Great. And I see you're a Stanford grad in economics and computer science. And I noted that you'd also dropped out for a year to build a LIDAR system for use on Volvo cars.
So yeah. Wow, you did your research. Yeah, it's true. It's true. After my freshman year, I joined a small startup doing self-driving cars, and it was sort of crazy. My summer there, I sort of threw myself in and did everything I could, and we raised $35 million in venture capital. And so then we grew to from 15 to 250 employees, and that really sort of showed me what you can do when you're pursuing something big and with talented people, and it was very exciting. But eventually I went back to school, and that was where Marriage Pact started.
That reminds me, there was another fellow from the dating industry that spun something up and then left it. And his name's Jason. I can't remember his last name, but he went over to another LIDAR company.
No way.
Yeah. He was the CEO of a LIDAR.
Small world.
Yeah, I'm going to look up the contact for you, and you might.
We'd have a lot to talk about.
Exactly. Yeah, and he was in Silicon Valley. So I can't quite get his name, but anyway, I'll follow up with you on that point. So you started Marriage Pact in 2017, and I see you've made 628,977 participants now. What attracted you into the dating space? You came over from LIDARs. What's the problem that you've observed that has to be solved here?
What's funny is I think I got into this by accident. It was really, so I was in a class during my undergrad called market design. This is, everybody here will be familiar with it, but from an academic perspective, this is a subfield of economics that's relatively new as far as the study of economics goes, where they've looked at supply and demand for a long time, but there's this sort of subfield they call market design, and the idea is that there are some many markets in this world. We decide using prices, but there are some markets that we have all collectively decided we should not use prices to figure out who gets what, right? There's people, there's resources, there's preferences, who gets what. And in market design, they tackle some of these challenging markets where there aren't millions of people, say, on either side, and we can't sometimes use prices. Sometimes it's auctions with just a few bidders. Sometimes it's matching. And like organ donations or something like that, every country but one in the world says you're not allowed to pay for a kidney.
What's the one, by the way?
Iran.
Okay.
Iran. But it's fascinating. There's a whole tangent on that. But basically, in the United States, it's 3 years waitlist to get a kidney, and in Iran, it's 2 weeks. Yeah. And so there's some ethical debates there. But of course, dating and marriage is another market where we've decided that, well, for long-term relationships, usually like prices are not an acceptable form of determining who gets matched with whom. For short-term relationships, obviously, around the world, that does happen. But in sort of mainstream long-term relationships, prices are not allowed. And so how do we match people? And obviously this is something that everybody here is super familiar with, but this was sort of the route that sort of academically I ended up here. And so we were supposed to write a final paper for this class, and I didn't want to do that. So I was like, how about I make a project instead? And that was the Marriage Pact. And then it took off a bit. And so now I've been doing it full time.
And so this platform is very unusual because we're all matching lots of people to lots of people ultimately. And there's really two schools of thought. There's a school of thought where we take control and we match, kind of like a la eHarmony. And most of the industries move towards, okay, you choose. You search for what you want, and then you choose. The way you're rolling with Marriage Pact is you essentially introduce people to the one on campus, and that's it. So how do you resolve for the one? What's your philosophy and chosen science for figuring this out? It's a marketplace, and you're equalizing and matching, but how are you doing that?
It's funny. I think if I had started out saying I want to make a dating app, I don't know or a dating service, I don't think that Marriage Pact is what we would have made, because it's kind of aggressive, as far as the functionality goes, right? So the main idea was that basically everybody signs up and then you get only one match, and they get you back, and everybody gets a match at the exact same moment, and you can use it once a year on college campuses. And so it's this very sort of niche thing. It was really meant to be a thought experiment. Like, hey, out of everyone who goes to your college, who is the best person for you to make a marriage pact with? And that's like an agreement where you sit down and then you say, hey, we both turn 40, maybe if we're both single, Mark, maybe we just maybe we should get married. And the idea was, hey, like there might not, Prince Charming might not go to your school, but somebody who's good enough for a 50-year relationship, if they had to, is probably at your school. And so, yeah, Benji, that's where the name comes from. It's not meant to be like, you marry this person. And the idea is like, hey, if neither of you finds anyone better, this person is someone whose number you should have. But it's funny. It's not necessarily very useful, and especially if you're looking to hook up with people, it is actually like the opposite of what's useful, because there's no photos, and in fact, you can't choose at all who you match with, and that goes back to this thought experiment sort of thing. It was, hey, who would be a great 50-year relationship with you if you were settling? And that's a very different sort of angle than many dating services take, and potentially actually a much less useful approach. But we found that because of the branding and because of the way that we approached it, people really did participate. And so now we've seen 630,000 people across 110 colleges in the United States. And of course, the design decision is you don't know what's best for you. You can't look at someone. There's nothing on the surface that tells you this person would be great for 50 years. It's only, the things deep down that you can't observe even on a first date. And so you couldn't possibly evaluate the people, and you couldn't possibly evaluate all of them, even if you could evaluate one person. And so we have to do that for you. And so we sort of adopted a radical, I guess, stance in the eHarmony direction.
And you're looking at, I believe, values, is it worldview and life stage?
Beliefs, yeah. And so, yeah, what's funny is actually that because we started in colleges, most people were in the same life stage. And so that wasn't really actually so essential beyond, like freshmen and seniors probably shouldn't get matched. Everybody gets upset by that. Like the freshmen, like the seniors don't want to reach out for fear of seeming creepy. The freshmen don't want to match with the senior because that seems scary. But beyond that, everybody was sort of in the same life stage. With Matchbox, we've now taken this sort of matching approach. Now it's in like 140 or so, 150 cities around the world. And now we do have to consider, we were talking to a small group earlier, life stage is really important. We've seen that age is something that obviously, I mean, you guys all know, like people care about, but actually more than age, it's life stage where, in New York City, for example, you can have a 31-year-old woman and a 31-year-old man. And sometimes the 31-year-old man is just in his dating around era, and he, doesn't want to settle down. And the woman might say, hey, like this wasn't a satisfactory match for me because we want different things. And so wanting different things or wanting the same things at the same time is an important coordination problem, in addition to, of course, the worldview, the values, the beliefs that sort of underpin all of it.
I think it's a very audacious notion, really, the idea of, okay, let's date and meet people on campus, but we've got this fallback position ultimately that a lot of people must actually meet and end up dating. It's like, okay, well, actually, let's give this a shot now. But do you have any insight on people who actually end up dating immediately?
Yeah, it's so you're right. I completely hadn't considered this the first year that we did this. I sort of made it. I really believed it. This thought experiment. I was like, this is all about like a person who have a backup plan with, like if you want, and let's just see what happens. But what happened was, and now we survey everyone 1 year later, because sometimes it takes a relationship, a few weeks to develop. So 1 year later, we find out that 50% of matches in general have a conversation, 30% of matches meet up in person. And if you meet up in person, there's a 1 in 10 chance that you'll still be dating 1 year later.
That's great. Changing the world. Have you had any marriages?
Yes, which is funny because again, this is not the point was to wait 15 years, not get married now. But there have now been 10 marriages, and keep in mind these are U.S. college students, and so getting married in your at 21 is actually like
no, don't do it.
Yeah, it's like sacrilegious. Yeah, no, it's really like nobody does that. But we've had 10 marriages so far. Yeah,
that's great. That's great. So there's some real efficacy here. I mean, what you've created is really working.
I think so.
Yeah,
it's exciting.
So how do you, say if you're rolling out to a new campus, how does that look? How do you get the word out? Is there anything in the way of paid advertising, or is it all purely word of mouth?
We've never paid for advertising for Marriage Pact.
Very cool.
It's all word of mouth. And it comes down to a couple of things. I mean, the social networks are very important. Like if you don't know anybody who goes to the college and you're trying to roll out your service at a college, that's very hard. But we've now rolled out Marriage Pact. We've launched 269 times at various colleges around the country. because we relaunch every year around some colleges. And I think it boils down to a couple things. One is that the product, you just need the brand and the product and the quality to be just completely top notch. Really, when you're in these consumer apps, and especially consumer social, the standards for polish are off the charts. And so it really just can't be clunky at all. It really needs to be like a good quality product, and it needs a look quality. You need the branding and positioning to be really clear and like grippy in your mind. And then you finally need to be very low friction. And this is really hard when you're making dating products, because it can be very high friction to create a profile. I have to answer tons of questions. Think of not just, hey, what's a good photo of me, but what are 5 good photos of me that showcase different aspects of my life? Like that starts to get very, very difficult. And so it needs to be very frictionless, very easy to participate. And so we think about those things and many others, but yeah, that's those kinds of things when we're rolling out into a new college.
It's really an irresistible notion thinking about it. I think one of the key traits of what you're doing is you've got FOMO. The fact it only happens once for the year. I mean, what part of the year do you do it in? Is it towards like second term, or?
It's different every school. So every week of the school year, we're doing different schools.
I see. Okay. So you're kind of supporting the schools throughout the year, so you balance out your load a bit.
Yeah.
Got it.
And you're totally right that there's FOMO to it. Not the Marriage Pact, no. The Marriage Pact is the Costco rotisserie chicken. It is I guess this is a very international audience. That was a very American reference. Sorry. But basically, it's a loss leader. The amount of money that we can make with Marriage Pact is kind of insignificant compared to the amount of money we can make taking what we've learned making Marriage Pact and then just packaging the fun parts of Marriage Pact and making that accessible to the rest, people outside of college and people around the world. And so Marriage Pact, we're going to keep very sort of precious and just, sort of fun. And then, but we're going to take what we've learned, and that's how we make things like Matchbox.
Well, look, I've got to ask the question now. What have you learned?
Oh man, it's fun because we have a small relationship science team, and I mean we've learned tons of things, and we've learned everything from like growth tactics around launching a product in communities, for example, getting adoption. We've learned things about the truth of relationship science and what causes people to be better for each other in the short term or the long term. And of course, I've learned a lot about leading teams over all this time, I guess. And then also, because people answer these questions about their values, worldview, and beliefs to get matched, we actually we've learned a lot about just people as demographers, really, And so, what are the demographics of college campuses today, and what do they believe is actually kind of an interesting question too. So sort of things across the board.
Now, I met you at the Global Love Conference, which is
That's right.
largely matchmakers. We sat down next to each other, actually, and you told me we were talking about some interesting statistics that I think was it shared at the conference, but it was statistics around how people are meeting.
That's right.
They've really started meeting online a lot more. But you refuted the statistics, and you actually got to the actual statistics and created a new graph, which is actually So can you walk us through that? What happened with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I met Mark for those in the audience. I met Mark at the Global Love Conference, and this is like an elite matchmakers. This is very like the hands-on matchmaking kind of service, but it's like a conference in New York that happens every year. And I'd gone for the first time, and Mark gave an incredible presentation about updates about the industry as a whole. And you had all of these statistics, and at first I was like, oh, like here's a couple of statistics, I've heard these, but then you just kept going, and then you had like 100 statistics you shared. I was like, wow, okay, I've learned a lot. And at one point you shared, you're like, how are people meeting? And there was like a Daily Mail study, or there was a UK based study of how people met, and like in 2000 2005, here's how they met. In like 2015 to 2020, here's how they met. And I thought, oh, actually, we've looked at this. There's a study that came out of Stanford called the How Couples Meet and Stay Together study. And this is it's US centric, but it was a random digit dial like phone survey. And they really tried to say, hey, how do people meet? And there's a chart that has gone viral in the past. And what's nice about this is that, so this is the chart, and I had seen this go viral in like 2019 or 2020 or something like that. And because this is a very, fascinating chart, right? It claims to show how people have met, every year since 1940 with a representative United States sample. And so obviously this is United States compared to other countries. And so, for example, a little bit more religious than Europe, right? But still you can see really what's happened here, where met through friends was a very common experience for the bulk of the 1900s. Of course, met through family has been declining permanently, and so is, met in primary, secondary school. You can see met through work, that green dashed line, kind of surged into the 1980s and 90s, and then kind of, has fallen out of fashion to meet people at work. And then, of course, the main story is that met online, it has completely surged. And there was a little bit of, meeting online before the internet really happened. And then ultimately when, Match.com, eHarmony, everything sort of really took off, and then .com boom of the late 90s, early 2000s, we surged to 20% of people meeting online. And then, of course, it kind of stalled out, and it took swipe-based apps and the proliferation of apps and mobile phones to take us into this next wave that shows no signs of stopping. But this is only through 2017. And so I was like, I was curious, what happened after 2017. And I also noticed there's one very curious thing about this chart, which is met in a bar or restaurant. Look at that. That's that purple X's. And there's nothing is going up after the rise of Tinder except met online and also met in a bar or restaurant. And I thought that's really curious. Is that really true that people are meeting in bars or restaurants? Because I thought that doesn't really make sense. And so what I did was I looked at here, actually, if you do the one right before that, there's with the yellow highlight.
Oh, yeah.
Right in the middle there. Yeah, I went and I pulled the original study that the authors had published about this. And buried deep in this study, because I was really curious. I was like, oh, like what explains that? And this is what explains that. They say figure one's apparent post-2010 rise in meeting through bars and restaurants for heterosexual couples is due entirely to couples who met online first and subsequently had a first date in person at a bar or restaurant.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know about you, but I felt completely deceived. I thought that is entirely not what the chart was showing. And so what I did was I got the original data, and they probably, because it's a study, they've published the data. And the idea is that other people can do research on that data. But we got the original data. We got in touch with them. We said, how did you manipulate the data, and how did you present it? Because, basically there's different smoothing choices and stuff like that. And we were able to take the same data and remove the people who had first met online and then met up at a bar or restaurant. We were able to remove them from that bar or restaurant category. And instead we got this picture, which obviously looks very different, right? The previous chart, which had been going around, tells an interesting story, but evidently a confusing and ambiguous one. And in this one, the story is unambiguous. And this is the real story where if you meet up at a bar or restaurant for a first date, but you actually first met each other through an online platform, nobody is saying, wow, you really met at a bar. You met at a bar. No, you met online. And so this is the real story, I guess, at least in the United States, for how couples meet. And it's different, heterosexual versus queer couples. Queer couples have been 80% online since the rise of the internet. And heterosexual people are just meeting up, or just catching up. But yeah, you can see that as of 2021, 2/3 of couples are meeting online, and it really, that's how people meet, and it's not even close.
This is really landmark. Is it published anywhere?
This chart was published on Reddit.
Okay.
/r/data is beautiful, and it hit the front page of Reddit. And so that's that's where, I mean, and of course there's the Stanford researchers behind it have a website where you too can download the data. It's very difficult to actually work with the data because it's split across 9 different phone surveys, and there's a few other things that make it difficult to work with. But yeah. So that's,
well done for identifying that. It's nice to see the truth of it.
Is it? I was going crazy. I thought, this chart doesn't really line up with what I expected. And there's so many times in life when someone will tell you something, and they'll show you a chart, and they'll say, oh yeah, this is how the world is. And then you look at it and you say, wait, really? And then you just you have to go look at how the chart was made. And then it turns out there was a completely fatal assumption in the construction of the chart. Yeah.
Well, thank you for digging that up. It's a good use case. It's a good, proves out the cause for online dating. So what are your plans for Marriage Pact?
Marriage Pact is just a fun college tradition. It is probably in dozens of schools, in probably 50 or 60 schools. It's the largest school tradition that isn't football in the United States. And there's actually 14 colleges now where you're more likely to do Marriage Pact than you are to graduate during your 4 years there.
Oh my God. That's great.
Isn't that crazy? When I saw that, I was like,
That's a great
I thought the point of going to college was to graduate, but no. More people are doing Marriage Pact than graduating. That's some of these places.
How about England? Are you going to go to England and other
That could be
countries?
fun. It could be fun. If you have a child or I don't know, somebody you know who's an undergraduate at one of United Kingdom's premier institutions, let me know. I'd be happy to make it happen.
Oh.
But yeah, Marriage Pact, we're going to sort of keep running as this sort of excellent, fun tradition. And then we're going to, basically package what we've been learning and make it available outside of colleges too. And that's what we're doing with Matchbox.
Great. Tell us more about Matchbox.
Matchbox is the exact same thing as the Marriage Pact, where you answer questions and you get, your most compatible match at the event or in your community based on your long-term, viability. Except that in this case, it's not just at a United States college. It could be for any community or event. Yeah. And so, for example, at this event, there's incredible people here. I'm seeing all these names in the audience, and I would love to meet you. But and you won't have the chance to meet everybody here. And so, who is the right person? Who's the one person you should have met before you left this? And Matchbox can help answer that. And so, people are using it for largely, the largest market is singles events right now, but also things like conferences and also things like work events doing platonic matching. And we've had churches do Bible study pairings and different things. So Matchbox is basically taking this hey, you can get a match based on your long-term compatibility idea, and it's making it available to anybody if they want to match their community or their event.
Great, that's a great service. How does a company sign up to be able to use it?
I'll put it in the chat, but match.box. That's our website.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. And time left. There's some good, companies doing in-person things and dinner things. There's a couple, 6-person dinners, and then there's an after party sort of things. We like to be. They organize everything. We like to just Benji, exactly. We like to offer sort of the software, and then let hosts decide how they would like to use it. Yeah. And so that's sort of how we do not just singles events, but also, a prominent venture capital firm in New York used it to match all their CEOs at their annual portfolio conference. And so we like to, but of course, I'm a huge fan of the singles events and the hosts that happen on Matchbox.
Yeah, imagine. Have you come across Lock and Key events? That seems to be a good.
No. Oh, yeah, I've heard. Yeah. I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah, the speed dating Lock and Key seems to have done quite well in the past, but nothing beats a nice wine tasting. So Q&A, folks, have you got any questions in Q&A? If you could put them in there. I see the general chat. Let me just check if we've got anything. I'll do a quick scan, but if you could put your question in Q&A, that'd be great. And fascinating. Yeah, I like the way that you deconstructed those numbers. Are you familiar with the OkCupid blog?
Yeah. The Christian Rudder, right, and Dataclysm. Really, really good book. And it's funny that there was a time when like data journalism like that was like a brand differentiating thing. Yeah. Good book. We do actually. So with our campus reports, we do a little bit of I wish I could screen share. I could show you, but some of the demographic stuff. This is the Stanford Marriage Pact happened fall of last year, although we recently released it. And we were like, oh, we thought we'd share a bit about the romantic playing field so you know what you're up against. But basically, we sort of dive into the demographics and we find, okay, physics majors would either fail a test than cheat. So physics says, agree, I'd rather fail than cheat. But design and science, technology, and society say they'd rather cheat than fail. You see things like far more seniors are computer scientists than freshmen. And you can either think of that as, over the course of your time at Stanford, you're more likely to become, to switch into computer science. But actually, there's another theory, which is the computer science job market was much better when these people started college than, after the rise of ChatGPT. And the computer science job market has gotten much worse here. But there's some fun things like this one, 75% of socialists wouldn't date a Republican. And so you can see basically by their stated political affiliation, how many report that they don't want their partner to have the above one. And so 75% of socialists say they wouldn't want to date a Republican. Mm-hmm. And it's just a sort of fun, it's a fun thing. Actually, I am in a relationship with a wonderful, wonderful woman. Her name is Kelly, and we've been dating 6 years now. Yeah. And we predate Matchbox. We post-date Marriage Pact, but only by 2 years. And we met the old-fashioned way through friends in college at a birthday party.
Gotcha. There's a lot to be said for real life as well.
Yeah.
genuine, get a real sense of chemistry. Benji has a question for you. What was the most surprising thing you discovered in matching people?
I think that they took it seriously and met up because it really truly was a thought experiment. And then the fact that it actually works. I don't know. We have thought experiments all the time. We have ideas all the time, and they don't always work. But the fact that it resonated so much and that people actually met up, I think, has been a joy to see.
No, it's very compelling. I mean, you can't help but talk about it. I mean, being on campus, it's like that's the thing that people talk about. It's like, really, who's your one? It's like, who could it possibly be? Especially people who are first time on the campus.
Oh yeah,
so it's multiple years, or just freshmen?
No, every year.
Every year, okay, good.
So you get 4 chances.
Yeah. So what happens if you could get matched with somebody else the second year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how about ages? Do you go like 1 year up, or how do you change?
We have a whole way of doing that, but yeah, it depends. Right. Yeah.
Great, Liam. This is fantastic. You've shone a light on something completely unique. You've not seen anything like this before, so really fantastic. We appreciate your time today. And
thank you for having me, Mark.
We've got to have you back. We'd like to learn more about Matchbox and get into some more stats with you as well. So great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.